yeah, this video is about 2 weeks late now. Partially because, well, I kind of had a bit of a moment where I needed to find a new job. And I'm currently still in that process, but it means that the video took a little bit longer than normal, and I kind of forgot about it the first week, till a certain someone reminded me. And then I realised, shit, this list should have taken a measly 3 days. Then I realised I don't know how to script write. Then I realised I don't have the footage. Then I realised I didn't even have the games on me today because it's at my old parents' house because I moved out. So this was a bit of a weird one to do, but it is a top 5 list on 5 games which I personally feel like need a reboot. Okay, just to verify myself, when I say reboot, I don't just mean doing the game from scratch, I also mean stuff like remasters or making a sequel finally. Similar to how either Tomb Raider was done as a reboot or Ratchet & Clank was a remaster or recreation of the original game. And with that said, let's jump into number 5. This was one of the games from my childhood which was quite underrated, and I only met people last year who knew of the game's existence. Whenever I mentioned to anybody about Skull Monkeys or Clayman from the Neverhood, people would look at me like I've just spewed shit out my mouth because I was talking bollocks if it wasn't Crash Bandicoot or Spyro. The Neverhood always stood out to me purely because of the design and how the game worked. It went from being a point-and-click adventure to the sequel being a platformer. And do you want to know the most impressive part of this? It was all made and animated via claymation. You would never expect to see that much detail in the game nowadays. A lot of developers now go with the cheap options of trying to make textures look good from a distance when you go close to them you can see they're really badly rendered. But when the original creators of Skull Monkeys brought out Army Croc recently, it was a breath of fresh air to see so much detail again put into a game. The problem however nowadays with Skull Monkeys is it's become fairly dated. It's still a fun game to play nonetheless, and I do enjoy revisiting it from time to time. However, there are a few issues with the game which doesn't make it as appealing as modern platformers. You've got the issue of no saves, the levels being ridiculously hard, and the controls being so tight that a single wrong move will get you killed. I honestly feel with the way Army Croc was brought out recently and how well that game did, it would be nice to see the developers of Army Croc get back in touch with EA, get the rights back to Skull Monkeys and either redo the first two, or make a final chapter and end off Clayman's era. I always felt that when Skull Monkeys was finished, Clayman never really had a proper send-off, so knowing that that game series never got an end was quite sad, and I always wanted a third one. Hell, I would even take a reboot. Just give me another game with Clayman and all these Skull Monkeys and all this clay goodness. Now originally, this one was actually going to be different. It was meant to be Call of Duty because I feel like Call of Duty nowadays has become shit. And let's be fair, most FPS games focused on consoles are pretty shit. You've got Battlefield 1 that's coming out which looks really promising, but it won't be as good as I want it to be purely because it's EA and it's Battlefield. Battlefield has not been as good as it used to be. I think my personal favourite of Battlefield had to be Bad Company 2. But I do like 3 and 4. Hardline, not the single player, it's a bit shit. But I had a thought when I was writing down about Call of Duty and how it's gone to the shitter with all this futuristic bollocks. It made me remember, there was a third series who tried to battle for the best FPS at the time, and that was Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor was one of the first war games I ever played, and today is still one of my favourites. I don't know why I came up with Call of Duty first in this list because this deserves it much more. The last good Medal of Honor game in my opinion had to be Rising Sun. There was something about how Medal of Honor approached this war game which just made me love it so much. Plus it had co-op, which was an interesting little feature, but itself Rising Sun was my favourite and I always wanted a second one. To this day I would still be happy if the developers came out and went, look, here's a new Medal of Honor. Go get it. But at the same time, I have my doubts if they made a new one, purely because the last Medal of Honor game was terrible, and that was trying to transition into the more modern kind of FPS game. At the time, they were still making the old, oh, it's set in the war, and Modern Warfare had come out, and so had Battlefield. And I think the developers were just like, well, we've got to try it at some point, and they cocked it up really bad. And if my memory serves me correctly, the multiplayer wasn't even made by them. I believe they got DICE to do it. So the multiplayer itself was basically just a completely different game. It didn't play like single player whatsoever. And that's sad. It's quite sad to see a developer having to rely on another type of multiplayer game to sell. Hopefully, if they do ever make a new one, which hopefully is set back in the war, they don't focus on the multiplayer and focus on what made Medal of Honor so great. And that was purely just the campaigns were so interesting and so fun. With Call of Duty and Battlefield nowadays, they don't focus on the single player aspect. They just make a shit story, give you some bland characters and go, there you go. Have fun with that. We're going to go play the multiplayer because we can sell about 4 DLCs with this and make 40 more pounds. Now, from what I have heard, there was apparently going to be a 2015 version of Medal of Honor. However, this probably would have been a more modern type of game again, maybe even futuristic if they wanted to go the same route as Infinite Warfare, and that would have been shit. Now, while I can't find anything confirmed, probably because I haven't looked properly because I'm a lazy shit, this is still going to stay as number 4 on my list, purely because I would love to see an old kind of Medal of Honor game again. Hell, I would actually like to see Rising Sun remastered in HD or a remake of it. But we're not just here to talk about Medal of Honor, it's a top 5 list. So we've still got 3 other games to have a look at, so let's have a look at number 3. Now, before you come back at me with, oh, technically Spyro's still a thing because of Skylanders, I don't believe that. I never played a Skylanders game. I don't plan on it. I don't really want to buy it for the Crash Bandicoot thing either because, I don't know, there's something about the whole model phase from Amiibos to Skylanders to LEGO Dimensions to Disney before they cancelled it. I don't find the appeal to it. I feel like it's a waste of money and you're paying £4 to £5, I don't know the price, for these little figurines which add a little bit to the game. I mean, you can spend your money on better things. Oh, no, I get it. Right, I get it. Yes, I can't talk, I buy DLC, whatever. But my point is, with Spyro, this isn't the kind of treatment he really deserves, does it? Spyro, as you all know, was quite an iconic character. He was the mascot that went up against Crash Bandicoot in a friendly competition for PlayStation. Seeing him getting this treatment doesn't really feel right. After so many shitty games made by Activision, by them getting weird developers to make them, it was a shame to see their last resort was using his name to sell a franchise and then pushing him to the back. While Spyro still is part of Skylanders, he's not the main focus. I believe the first one was called Spyro's Adventure, and after that they did nothing with it. I would personally like to see a Spyro game which was the original style of Spyro. I mean, hell, if Crash Bandicoot's getting a supposed remaster, why can't Spyro? I think they both deserve it at this point. They're good games. You can still play the old ones today and still have a laugh with it. Spyro 3 is my favourite Spyro game. So far, nothing has beaten that. I would happily see a HD or a remake of that game, and I would be happy. And I know a lot of people like Spyro 3 because they prefer Spyro 2, but to myself, Spyro 3 was always the one that set the pavement of why I like Spyro so much. I mean, Enter the Dragonfly can fuck off, but besides that, it was a great series which just got run into the ground because they were trying to make so much money from the name. And the same thing happened to Crash. Thankfully, Activision have learned and they're actually going to make a new Crash Bandicoot game. Just give Spyro the same treatment, goddammit. Also, just to add a bit more coal to the flame, the only reason they have Crash in the new Skylanders is obviously because the game is not selling as well as it used to. I can imagine the first Skylanders being one of the better sales. I don't really know how the sales have went for these games, but the idea of putting Crash into it, just say like, hey, these games still exist. You can get Crash in them now and have Crash and Spyro together in co-op. Woohoo! Right, now we're getting on to the interesting stuff. At number 2 we have Voodoo Vince. Now Voodoo Vince to me was one of my favourite platformer games back from the original Xbox days. And to be fair, it was one of the reasons I actually got an Xbox. Voodoo Vince had a really interesting theme behind it and he reminded me of a Tim Burton film. And is that my phone? Hold on. Give me 2 seconds. My fucking phone's going off. Oh, what do you want? Hello?
Dude, where have you been?
Oh, hey man. Sorry, I've been a bit busy. I've been working on a top 5 video and I'm currently in the middle of talking about Voodoo Vince. You just actually interrupted me.
Oh, you're talking about Voodoo Vince. That's great. Are you excited for the remaster?
Yeah, I know. What, did you say remaster? Since when?
No, I'm serious. Check Steam.
No, you've got to be bullshitting me. I don't believe that.
Dude, it's right there on Steam. Go take a look.
Wow, they're actually making a remaster of Voodoo Vince. That's a crock of shit. What am I meant to put there instead? I can't really talk about a game which has already had an announcement of one. That just kind of defeats the purpose. Now, what game is there which is unique, looks great, and has a Tim Burton feel to it? I don't think there is one. Unless... Right, well, thanks to the developers realising how great Voodoo Vince was, that kind of ruined my list a little, but no fret, I have something which is just as deserving of number 2 as Voodoo Vince. Now, before anybody says I've just whacked this in the list, let me just say, Skull Monkeys was not meant to be on this list. It was meant to be Medieval, and then Voodoo Vince. But seeing as Voodoo Vince is now finally coming out again, and I'm going to have to review it at some point, Medieval will just take number 2 because there's nothing more deserving between that and number 1. Medieval was one of the first PlayStation games I actually played, which I can remember. My first game was most likely Crash Bandicoot, but I was a toddler at the time, so I probably don't remember it because I was too busy sucking my thumbs. Medieval had this really interesting design behind it, and it felt quite gothic and dark, similar to how Tim Burton films would work. If there was a film adaptation of this game, I would want Tim Burton to do it, and I would go see it at least 3 times because I know it would be hilarious. I know you can already say that Medieval had a remaster when it had Resurrection for the PSP, but I don't personally believe that was enough to justify it. Medieval is a game that should be timeless, but due to the controls of the game back in the day, it hasn't aged entirely well. Which is a shame really, because I know a lot of people don't really like the game anymore, and if I've recommended it to someone, they always say about the clunky controls, or that the game is stupidly hard, which to be fair it can be at times, or that you can't save during certain parts of the game. While I can completely understand this, nostalgia will kick in and just say, oh well, the game's still perfectly fine and I really enjoy it. And to be fair, I can still play it to this day. I mean, I haven't really played Medieval 2 that much anymore, but Medieval 1 was just a big thing for me. But honestly, I feel like Medieval nowadays would look amazing. Imagine it in the Unreal Engine. Actually, you don't have to. Someone made a tech video demonstrating how Medieval would look if it was done on a proper engine with decent graphics design. I'll show a little bit of a clip now just because it looks amazing, but I can't go into it much because first, it's not my video, secondly, it's only a tech demo. Maybe it would be enough for Sony to see that yeah, we do need another one. A lot of old games deserve this kind of treatment, and Medieval would be a prime one. Hell, for an interesting idea, you could even make Medieval a fully free roam game. Get out the loading screens and just have the game focused in an open world system. We have the technology at this point, we might as well do it. And one last thing, just to show that I do really like Medieval, if you check my Twitter for Halloween, my picture is Sir Daniel Fortescue. If that's not enough to say I love Medieval, I don't know what is. But then again, there is one more game that deserves number 1. But first, I think it's time for some honourable mentions.
Nice try, big boy.
Now, before anything, I just have to make one point very, very clear. I fucking love Gex. Gex is one of those platformers which is timeless, and I have played it so many times. Yeah, you can only go in certain directions due to the D-pad, and yes, the render distance isn't always that great, but the concept itself and the humour from the character is just gold. I've never felt bored playing these games, and I've beaten Gex 2 and 3 about 4 or 5 times now. I just want a new one. I couldn't even give a shit if it was just a redo of the first one in 3D. Just give me another Gex game. I can't think of a way to describe what I feel about this game without going into a full-on review of it, and eventually that day will come. But one of the best things I have to say about it is the voice actor for the second and third one. While Americans got the same voice actor over and over again, we got 2 different voice actors, one being Danny John Jules, who was the cat from Red Dwarf. And I'm a big Red Dwarf fan, so seeing this in a Gex game just made it like 20 times better. I've always found the concept of Gex really interesting about how they use channel themes to make different kind of levels, and then in Gex 3 they had each level be its own kind of TV station. And it's a shame they never made another one, because even though the third one isn't entirely great at times, the way it uses that idea to the full really worked, and no level was the same. With Gex 2 you did have the same level a couple of times, like the cartoon world or horror channel, where it did feel samey after a while, but with Gex 3 it worked in such a magnificent way where you actually felt like you were progressing through the game. When you played these new TV station levels, you actually felt like you had been playing a new level because you hadn't seen that theme yet. Like I said with Gex 2, you would have the same kind of themes over time, so you'd feel like you're just going around in circles. I'm not sure if everybody feels that, but that's how I personally felt it. Now, I'd still consider Gex 2 out of the two games to be my favourite. I've never really played the first one, but I've been meaning to get around to it. If they were to bring Gex back, I would love to see a new way to approach different kind of stages of media. You could have something to do with YouTube or reality TV shows, or even Netflix at this point. When I say Netflix, I basically mean imagine Gex going back through the old levels from the first 3 games, but in HD. The way technology is going today, there's so much more Gex could grasp onto, and it's a shame that they never made a 4th one. I know the 3rd one didn't really sell as much, and it's a shame that that happened, but even Square Enix have been looking for a way to bring Gex back. They opened up a while ago to any developer to give them an idea and they would help them make the game. It's a shame nothing ever came from that, or nothing was ever announced, because at this point, with platforms becoming a big thing again, with Yooka-Laylee for example, it makes more than enough sense for Gex to come back. Yeah, I think that's about it. After Gex, there's no other games that come to mind. Now, something's wrong because I still have no idea how I got here. There's something missing, or something that we've forgotten for the time being. But it's coming up to Halloween, so I feel like we're going to miss that for a little bit more. But I need a game. I need a game to review for Halloween. But I don't want to do something generic like Amnesia or Five Nights at Freddy's because it's frightening. I would rather play a game that I've owned for a while. I consider the shittest game I've ever bought, but I can't think of one. Oh. Oh, not that. No. Oh, hey, you've made it to where the end slate would actually be if I had one. Why are you still doing it? Well, I guess I can just say a couple of things. First off, I want to say sorry for this taking so long, because this video probably doesn't seem like it justifies taking so long. I got lazy, I had stuff to do, I'm sorry. But I would also just like to say thank you to my friend Tough Cookie from the Rusty Change group for helping do a little voice bit for the phone. And I guess the last couple of things would be, I do have a Patreon now, so that will give you access to stuff, I guess? I mean, it's there. I never really announce these things anymore. But besides that, if you like the video, please let me know, because this is the stuff I want to get into, and if there's any feedback, that would be great. Besides that, I have a Twitter, and yeah, have a good night.